Okay, now we are back in Ableton Live 11 and I have selected a nice plucky melodic techno lead and we are going to really get into it now. So to just give you a little bit of a understanding of what the sound is and what the sound is like, we'll just play something very quickly using Midigrid. Again, doesn't sound so exciting here. However, as I open up, you get the idea. So those sounds can really expand. Again, especially as I use the ADSR envelope to take it from a very subtle, plucky kind of sound into something much bigger. So we're going to go for that drama, shall we say. And now we've got an understanding as to how Midigrid works, basically. And we can really start to decipher what's going on. Let's have a little look at some of the presets that we have in this melodic techno pack that I've built. So I'm going to go into the pack and you can see the arpeggios here. And we could go through a whole heap of them and see exactly which one we like. So we could start with the grid here and you can see things start to get a little bit more elaborate. And again, I'm specifically really going for this arpeggio sound. So again, you can see it's almost like a waterfall from top to bottom, and it starts to get pretty interesting. So I'm going to, at this point, just hit play, and you can hear exactly what I mean. That might sound a little bit low, so what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to click and drag upwards here just to get a G1, G octave 1 note. So it's got that real beautiful kind of psychedelic feel. And all it is just arpeggios going down all the different degrees of the G minor scale. So it's amazing how quickly you can really go into something really interesting. So again, I've called this preset the grid, and that's probably because it sounds a bit like a Tron movie, which is exactly the point I was going for. Now you can hit the left or right buttons here, and you can go to the next one, and you can hear stuff like this. That's got that kind of like, triplety feel, which you hear a lot of Tale of Us stuff, and specifically a lot of Anima stuff. You really hear that a lot. Again, you've got this one here, which is quite interesting. And you can do arps left to right as well. And again, you can do arps left to right as well as top to bottom, because again, two things here. Once a trigger reaches an edge, whether it's a left edge, a right edge, a top or a bottom edge of the grid, it will trigger a note. The only difference between the top and the bottom and the left and the right is that you have the lower octave going down the right hand side here, and then the higher octave, again, A3 here being the meeting point, rolls all the way up to A4. So you start to get an understanding of the various points on the grid. And it's interesting as well, because if you notice with arps, the shapes tend to be like fairly symmetrical. So it's due to the way that the grid actually is formulated. So you can start to experiment with different shapes, different patterns, shall we say. And those patterns will result in something quite interesting musically happening. So we can keep going through these. And again, this one creates a bit of a randomness because, again, so far you will have seen no redirection happening. Everything's very stable. So if you're worried about Midigrid not creating stable patterns that can be repetitive, that you can then iterate on, don't worry about that. There is, that way of working, whether you've got the triggers working just exclusively left to right or top to bottom, so they won't meet in their lanes and they just stay in their respective lanes and do their jobs, then that's absolutely fine. And this one I've deliberately included redirect. So the redirect will now add that little element of randomness. So to be honest, I'm about to hit play. I've got no idea what it's going to do. Let's find out. Should be fun. Comes up with some cool stuff. Just put the click on there so you can get an idea of the rhythm. And again, that's in A minor. So again, very basic minor key. All the white notes on the keyboard, starting at A, moving up to the following A. So you can work on that front. And again, with Midigrid, beautiful. You could actually just change that to an F. So let's see what it's like in F minor. Might be something that would be quite interesting. And you'll notice the beginning. Obviously, it's a very similar pattern to what was in before in the previous preset. Now, that shows that these patterns work regardless of what key you're in, and also whatever the root note is. So it could be a minor key, it could be a major key, it could be any one of these interesting modes like Dorian, Phrygian, Mixolydian, all those posh sounding things. Modes are really simple to understand. They're just slightly different scales, and they're very connected in a different way to the keyboard, shall we say, without this turning into a music theory course. However, well worth experimenting with. And as you've heard, it will do different things and sound slightly different depending upon what the root note and what scale you put this in. So we can carry on dialing through. The one I really wanted to dial into, though, that I had plans for was this one called Drama. You'll also notice the presets are always, denoted with what key it's in. So I'm feeling this F minor. And again, you can see it's a slightly different pattern. And again, with those triggers facing each other, we're not going to get a redirect here. We're just going to get them working together and just pumping each other in different directions when they meet. So you'll see this and we'll get an idea about where we're going. Drop. So yeah, straight out of the box, it's got that drama, right? So it's got that real musical, real emotional, again, maybe almost like quite melodramatic tone, which is exactly what I was going for. And again, with the filter cutoff on Diva being low and just taking the ADSR down, taking the decay down, you still get that lovely movement. And again, you can add a little bit of swing here on Midigrid, which makes it perfect for getting that little bit of syncopation and not making everything feel quite static. I like my melodic techno, my progressive house to be on the groovier side, quite frankly. And it's one of the things I like to do that sets me apart from other producers, because I do find a lot of melodic techno in this modern era, shall we say, a little bit static and a little bit on the grid. So I like to be able to add that little bit of groove and that little bit of humanity, and Midigrid's perfect for that. So we've got a lovely sounding preset here on Diva. We've got a great arpeggio in Midigrid, and now we know what our core root note is and what scale we're in, because we're going to work in F minor. So there's a number of different things that we can do from here, where we could actually start writing an underlying chord progression. We could also potentially write something else which is a bit more melodic, and we could use Midigrid for that to give it like a proper top line or a riff. But what we'll do is in the next video is we'll look at writing an underlying kind of like chord progression, which we can then use to create stuff like possibly pads or even a sub bass. So we'll start with it being a sub bass, and then that will give us the direction to work on for the rest of the track and getting this ready for arrangements. So stay tuned. Meet me in the next video. because it's all going to be about how we can use this as a jumping off point to create those harmonic progressions and then move this idea forward.